speed. In the wild, it's everything. The difference between predator and prey, between life and death, between victory and failure. The fastest survive. The slowest become cautionary tales. But what happens when the slowest creature in the jungle enters the deadliest race ever conceived? When patience goes head-to-head with power, when strategy faces off against speed. This is the story of Terra, an old tortoise who proved that sometimes the longest path to the finish line is actually the shortest. A tale of resilience, determination, and the counterintuitive truth that slowing down can be the fastest way forward. Because in the race for survival, sometimes the tortoise doesn't just beat the hare. Sometimes the tortoise is the only one who finishes at all. Significantly, her once steady pace reduced to what the faster creatures mockingly called geological time. The younger animals treated her with polite dismissal. They'd nod respectfully when she spoke, then immediately ignore her advice in favor of their own impulsive decisions. Speed was currency in the jungle, and Terra was bankrupt by those standards. She'd made peace with it, mostly. She contributed in her own ways, offering advice to those rare individuals willing to listen, helping younger tortoises navigate the challenges she'd already faced, serving as a living repository of jungle history and survival strategies. But there was still a part of her, buried deep beneath layers of patience and acceptance, that wanted to prove something, to demonstrate that her slow, methodical approach to life had value beyond mere survival. That speed wasn't the only path to success. She just never imagined the opportunity would come in the form of a death race. The gathering was called by the jungle's Council of Elders, representatives from each major species who managed territorial disputes and coordinated responses to external threats. But this meeting was different. The atmosphere crackled with tension and fear. Raja, the tiger who chaired the council, explained the situation in grave tones. The jungle was dying. A mysterious blight had appeared at its edges, killing plants and poisoning water sources. It was spreading inward, slowly but inexorably, threatening to destroy the entire ecosystem. But there was hope. Ancient texts in the Temple of the Ancestors, located at the jungle's hidden heart, contained knowledge of dealing with such blights. The temple was heavily protected by natural defenses, intended to keep out invaders, but now serving as a deadly obstacle course for those trying to reach it. A race would be held. The first animal to reach the temple, retrieve the knowledge, and return would save everyone. But the path was treacherous. Quicksand bogs, predator territories, rope bridges over chasms, and finally, the rapids of no return, a fast-moving river that had claimed countless lives. The fastest, strongest animals would compete. Speed and power would determine who saved the jungle. Volunteers stepped forward immediately. Zara, a cheetah whose speed was legendary. Kavi, a young monkey known for his agility and fearlessness. Arya, an eagle who could cover distances in minutes that took ground animals days. And then, from the back of the gathering, a quiet voice. "I'll compete." The crowd turned to find Terra slowly making her way forward. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, the kind reserved for when someone says something inappropriate, but well-intentioned. Raja tried to be diplomatic. He appreciated her courage, but this race required speed. Lives depended on reaching the temple quickly. Perhaps she could contribute in other ways. Terra's response was calm but firm. The temple had been built by tortoises. She explained. Her ancestors had designed its defenses with tortoise capabilities in mind. Speed might get you there first, but only the right approach would get you through. Besides, she'd outlived every creature currently on the council. Surely that suggested some competence in navigating deadly challenges. The argument was compelling enough that Raja reluctantly agreed, though his expression made clear he expected her to quit within the first mile. That night, Terra sat alone near the eastern stream, questioning her own decision. What had she been thinking? She was 63 years old, slower than she'd ever been, about to compete against animals who could move 10 times faster than her best pace. The logical part of her mind screamed that this was foolish pride, that she'd prove nothing, except that old tortoises should know their limitations, that she'd likely die in the attempt, adding tragedy to foolishness. But another part, the part that had kept her alive through 6 decades of jungle life, whispered different truths. She'd seen countless fast animals die young, killed by their own recklessness, by predators they didn't see coming, by mistakes made in haste. Speed without wisdom was just rushing toward disaster. She thought about the temple's defenses. Her grandmother had told stories about them. Obstacles designed not to test speed but patience, not to reward power but strategy. The ancient tortoises who'd built the temple had valued the same qualities Terra had spent her life developing. Maybe, just maybe, this race would prove that those qualities mattered. Her friend Marcus, an elderly elephant, found her there. He asked if she was certain about this decision. Terra admitted she wasn't certain about anything, except that she had to try. That she'd spent 60 years being dismissed as too slow, too cautious, too patient. That even if she failed, she needed to know she'd given her absolute best to something that mattered. Marcus studied her with wise eyes, then shared his own observation. In all his years, he'd noticed that the animals who survived longest weren't the fastest or strongest. They were the ones who thought before acting, who planned before moving, who understood that endurance often mattered more than speed. Terra might be slow, he said, but she'd outlasted entire generations of faster animals. That suggested her approach had merit. The conversation gave Terra something she desperately needed, not confidence in victory, but confidence in her decision to compete. Whatever the outcome, she would face this challenge with the same methodical determination that had carried her through 6 decades. The race would begin at dawn. Terra spent the remaining hours doing what she did best: planning. She mentally mapped the course based on descriptions she'd heard. The quicksand bogs would slow the fast animals. They'd rush in and get stuck. She could navigate around the edges, testing each step. The predator territories would be dangerous for everyone, but tortoises had natural armor. The rope bridges would challenge her weight, but she could test their stability carefully. And the rapids of no return. That would be the critical test. Fast animals would try to swim across, fighting the current with raw strength. Terra would need to find another way, perhaps upstream, perhaps using rocks as stepping stones, perhaps waiting for the right conditions. She wouldn't win through speed. She'd win through preparation, patience, and the hard-earned wisdom of 63 years of survival. As the first light touched the horizon, Terra made her way to the starting line. The other competitors were already there, stretching, preparing, radiating confidence and energy. Zara the cheetah glanced at Terra and actually laughed. Not cruelly, but with genuine amusement at the absurdity of a tortoise competing in a speed race. Kavi the monkey offered sympathetic encouragement, suggesting Terra should pace herself and not feel bad about dropping out when it became too difficult. Arya the eagle simply looked puzzled, as if trying to understand why Terra was there at all. None of them saw her as a real competitor. They saw her as a well-meaning elder, making a symbolic gesture before inevitable failure. Terra let them think that. Underestimation, she'd learned long ago, was its own strategic advantage. The sun broke fully over the horizon. Raja raised his paw for silence, explained the rules one final time, then dropped it with a roar. Begin! The race for the jungle's survival had started, and Terra, the slowest animal in the competition, took her first careful step forward while her competitors disappeared into the distance. The fast animals vanished within seconds, their forms becoming distant blurs as they raced toward the jungle's heart. Terra maintained her steady pace, slow by any standard, but consistent and sustainable. She could hear the excited calls of spectators lining the early part of the route, their voices fading as the competitors spread out. The crowd's energy was focused entirely on the front runners, on the dramatic displays of speed and power. No one was watching the tortoise at the back, which suited Terra perfectly. The first major obstacle was the sunken meadow, a beautiful clearing that became treacherous after rains. The ground looked solid, but was actually a network of quicksand pockets disguised by grass and flowers. Terra arrived at its edge to find evidence of the front runner's passage: disturbed grass, deep tracks, and most tellingly, signs of struggle. Someone had gotten stuck and fought their way out, losing precious time. She took a different approach entirely. Instead of crossing directly like the others, she skirted the meadow's edge, testing each step before committing her weight. It took longer, much longer, but she never once felt the ground give way beneath her. Halfway around, she found Kavi, trapped up to his waist in quicksand, struggling futilely. His frantic movements were only making him sink deeper. Terra called out instructions. Stop moving, spread your weight, work slowly to extract one limb at a time. Kavi, exhausted and panicked, followed her guidance. It took 20 minutes, but he eventually pulled free, covered in mud and gasping. He looked at Terra with new respect, thanking her before racing off again, still faster than her, but now understanding that speed without caution had nearly killed him. Terra continued her careful path around the meadow, patient and methodical, losing time but avoiding the traps that had slowed everyone else. The second major obstacle was the contested lands, a stretch of jungle claimed by a pack of feral dogs who attacked any intruders. The fast animals had planned to simply outrun them, relying on speed to avoid confrontation. Terra arrived to find the aftermath of that strategy: torn earth, broken branches, blood trails. The dogs had ambushed the racers, and while everyone had apparently escaped, they'd all taken damage and lost time fighting. Terra approached the territory differently. She didn't try to sneak past or run through. Instead, she stopped at its edge and withdrew into her shell, becoming a motionless rock. The dogs found her within minutes, circling this strange object with suspicious sniffs. But there was nothing to attack. No movement, no threat, no prey behavior. After 10 minutes of investigation, they lost interest and wandered away. Terra waited another 10 minutes to be sure, then slowly resumed her journey through their territory. Whenever dogs approached, she repeated the same strategy. Stop, withdraw, become invisible through stillness. It was painfully slow. The territory crossing took her 3 hours, but she emerged completely uninjured, having spent 0 energy on fighting or fleeing. Meanwhile, the faster animals had burned precious energy on combat and were now nursing injuries that would slow them over time. The third major obstacle was a series of rope bridges spanning a deep gorge. They swayed dangerously in the wind. Many were partially damaged, and all looked capable of supporting fast, light animals, but questionable for a heavy tortoise. Terra found Arya resting near the bridges, one wing clearly injured from her earlier encounter with the dogs. The eagle had tried to fly across the gorge, but had been caught by a sudden downdraft and nearly dashed against the rocks. She looked at Terra with frustration, admitting she might have been too confident, that perhaps speed and flight weren't solutions to every challenge. Terra examined the bridges carefully. The first 3 looked too damaged for her weight. The 4th was sturdier, but testing it required patience. She inched onto it slowly, distributing her weight, feeling for weak points. When she detected instability, she backed up and tried a different path across the same bridge, using the stronger support ropes. It took an hour to cross, a distance Arya could have flown in seconds. But Terra made it safely, while the eagle, despite her speed advantage, was grounded by injury. Before continuing, Terra shared something with Arya. Sometimes, the fastest path isn't the best path. Sometimes taking time to assess and plan saves more time than rushing and failing. Arya, humbled and thoughtful, nodded slowly. She couldn't continue the race, but she'd learned something valuable. As Terra continued through the jungle, she began encountering the other competitors more frequently. Not because she was catching up. Her pace remained tortoise slow, but because they were slowing down. Zara the cheetah, built for sprints not marathons, was resting against a tree, her sides heaving with exhaustion. She'd burned through her energy reserves in the first hour and now struggled to maintain even a moderate pace. She looked at Terra with something between disbelief and respect, asking how the tortoise was still moving, still maintaining that steady pace. Terra's answer was simple. She'd started at the pace she could sustain indefinitely. No bursts, no sprints, no wasted energy, just consistent, methodical progress. Zara admitted that she'd never considered endurance. In her world, everything was about explosive speed, catching prey, escaping predators, winning short-distance competitions. But this race was different. This required sustained effort over hours, maybe days. Terra didn't gloat or lecture. She simply continued her steady pace, leaving Zara to contemplate the difference between fast and persistent. As the sun began setting, Terra realized something remarkable. She was no longer in last place. Some competitors had quit entirely, unable to continue. Others were so slowed by injuries or exhaustion that her steady pace had overtaken them. The race wasn't over. She still faced the deadliest obstacle, the rapids of no return. But for the first time, victory seemed possible. Not probable, but possible. And that possibility, earned through hours of patient perseverance, felt more valuable than any early lead built on speed alone. As darkness fell, Terra found a safe spot and rested, conserving energy for tomorrow's final challenge. Around her, the jungle settled into its nocturnal rhythms, and somewhere ahead, beyond the next ridge, she could hear the roar of the rapids waiting. Terra woke before dawn, her body stiff but functional. The final day would determine everything. She resumed her steady pace toward the sound that had filled her dreams, the thunderous roar of the rapids of no return. She arrived at the riverbank as the sun broke the horizon, illuminating a scene of natural violence. The river was at least 50 feet wide, moving with terrifying speed. White water crashed over rocks, creating whirlpools and undertows that could pull down even strong swimmers. On the far bank, barely visible through the mist, stood the temple of the ancestors. So close, and yet separated by an obstacle that seemed impossible for a tortoise to overcome. Terra wasn't the first to arrive. Kavi sat on a rock, staring at the water with defeated eyes. He'd tried to swing across on vines, but they'd snapped. He'd attempted to find a narrower crossing upstream, but the rapids extended for miles in both directions. He looked at Terra and shook his head. They'd come all this way, survived all the obstacles, only to be stopped by water they couldn't cross. But Terra wasn't ready to surrender. She began walking upstream, examining the river carefully, looking for patterns the rushing water might be hiding. Kavi followed Terra as she made her slow inspection, asking what she was looking for. Terra explained her thinking. The river was fed by mountain runoff, which meant its flow varied throughout the day. In early morning, when the mountain air was cold, the flow decreased. By afternoon, when melting increased, it would be even more dangerous than now. But there was another factor. The river's current created patterns, areas where rocks and terrain created temporary calms, brief moments where the water slowed enough for crossing. She'd crossed rivers like this before, decades ago, not by fighting the current, but by working with it, using the brief windows it provided, moving in stages rather than trying to cross all at once. Kavi watched with growing fascination as Terra identified a series of rocks that formed a potential path. Not a straight line. That would be impossible. But a zigzag route that used each rock as a temporary shelter from the main current. The timing would be critical. Each move from one rock to the next had to occur during the brief lulls in the current, the moments when water pulled back slightly before surging forward again. It was the kind of strategy that required patience, observation, and perfect timing. Everything Terra had been developing for 63 years. Everything the faster animals had never needed to learn. Terra positioned herself at the river's edge, studying the current's rhythm. She watched for 20 minutes, learning the pattern, seeing the 2-second lulls that occurred every 43 seconds. Then, she made her first move. She entered the water during a lull, her weight providing stability against the current. She reached the first rock, a flat stone about 8 feet from shore, and locked her claws into its crevices, becoming immovable. She waited, watched, counted the rhythm. When the next lull came, she moved to the second rock, this one partially submerged. The water rushed around her shell, but she'd positioned herself to present minimal resistance, letting the current flow past rather than fighting it. Kavi watched from shore, his earlier defeat transforming into hope. If Terra could do this, if she could cross using strategy and patience, maybe the race wasn't over. Rock by rock, lull by lull, Terra advanced. Sometimes she waited 5 minutes on a single rock, studying the next move. Sometimes the lull was too brief, and she'd wait for the next cycle. Once, She retreated to a previous rock when the current proved stronger than anticipated. It was slow, painfully slow, but it was working. Halfway across, disaster struck. The current shifted, likely due to an upstream obstacle being dislodged, and the pattern changed. The lulls became irregular, unpredictable. Terra found herself pinned on a mid-river rock with no clear path forward or back. The changed current had eliminated the route she'd been following. For the first time in the entire race, doubt crashed over her harder than the water itself. She'd made it this far through patience and planning. But what if some obstacles simply couldn't be overcome with strategy? What if speed had been the answer all along, and she'd just been too stubborn to accept it? Terra remained on her rock for an hour, studying the new pattern, searching for a solution. Behind her, she could hear Kavi calling encouragement from shore. Other animals had gathered, competitors who'd arrived too exhausted to attempt crossing, spectators who'd followed the race's progress. They were all watching the slow tortoise, pinned on her rock, seemingly defeated. Then Terra saw it. The current's change had eliminated her planned route, but it had created a new one. A series of underwater ridges, now temporarily exposed by the shifted flow, formed stepping stones at an angle she hadn't considered. But using them required something terrifying. She'd have to fully submerge, trusting her ability to navigate underwater, using only touch, emerging at precise points where brief air pockets existed near rocks. It was dangerous. One mistake in timing or position, and she'd be swept downstream to her death. But staying on this rock meant certain failure. The temple would remain unreached, the jungle unsaved, her entire journey wasted. Terra made her decision. She took a deep breath, released her grip, and submerged. The current grabbed her immediately, but she'd anticipated its direction. She used her weight as an anchor, claws finding purchase on the underwater ridge. She pulled herself forward, inch by inch, feeling her way in complete darkness. Her lungs began burning. The air pocket she'd planned to reach seemed impossibly far. Doubt screamed that she'd miscalculated, that she'd die here, proving all the skeptics right. Then her head broke surface in the exact air pocket she'd targeted. She gasped, recovered, studied the next segment. 3 more underwater traverses, 3 more chances to drown, 3 more opportunities to prove that patience and precision could overcome impossible odds. She completed all 3, emerging on the far bank exhausted, battered, but alive. The watching crowd erupted in cheers. Kavi jumped and screamed from the opposite shore. Even Zara, who'd arrived too tired to attempt crossing, roared her approval. Terra had done it. The slowest animal in the race had overcome the obstacle that had stopped everyone else. Terra entered the temple of the ancestors, her body trembling from exertion but her mind clear and focused. The ancient texts were exactly where the story said they'd be, preserved in waterproof containers by tortoises who'd anticipated every challenge. The knowledge about combating the blight was detailed and actionable. Terra memorized the key points: certain plants that needed to be cultivated, specific water treatment protocols, timing requirements for implementation. The return journey took 3 days. Terra didn't rush. There was no point. She'd won the race the moment she'd crossed the rapids. Now, she simply needed to deliver the information safely. Other animals helped her along the way. Kavi, who'd learned to appreciate patience, carried her across difficult terrain. Arya, recovered enough to fly, scouted safe paths. Even Zara used her remaining energy, to clear obstacles from Terra's route. The race had started with individuals competing against each other. It ended with everyone working together to ensure the winner's success. When Terra finally returned to the starting point, the entire jungle was waiting. Raja received the information with profound gratitude, immediately organizing implementation teams. But before the crowd dispersed, Terra asked to speak. Her voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the attentive silence. She thanked everyone for their support. But more importantly, she wanted to share what the race had taught her. Lessons that might help the jungle beyond just curing the current blight. Speed had its place, she acknowledged. Zara's velocity, Kavi's agility, Arya's flight. All were valuable in appropriate contexts. But the race had proven something else. That endurance often mattered more than speed. That strategy could overcome raw power. That patience was its own form of strength. The fastest animals had reached obstacles first, but only the most thoughtful had overcome them. The strongest had initially dominated, but only those who conserved energy had finished. The most confident had started strong, but only the most adaptable had succeeded. The jungle's survival, she suggested, depended on appreciating all approaches, all speeds, all strategies. Fast animals and slow ones, powerful creatures and patient ones, each contributing their unique strengths to collective challenges. The crowd absorbed her words with thoughtful silence. These weren't revolutionary ideas, but coming from the oldest, slowest animal who just won the deadliest race, they carried undeniable weight. Raja approached Terra afterward, offering her a position on the Jungle Council. Her wisdom, proven under the most extreme circumstances, deserved a voice in jungle governance. Terra accepted, understanding that her victory hadn't been about proving speed wrong or slowness right. It had been about demonstrating that different approaches had value, that true wisdom meant knowing when to move fast and when to move deliberately, when to push hard and when to pause and think. As the celebration continued around her, Terra found a quiet spot and settled in, her shell warm from the afternoon sun. She'd started the race wanting to prove something about herself. She'd ended it proving something about the nature of success itself. Sometimes, the tortoise does beat the hare, not through becoming faster, but by recognizing that not all races are won through speed. Some require endurance, some require strategy, some require the hard-won wisdom that comes from 63 years of patient persistence. And sometimes, the slowest path to the finish line is actually the only path that gets you there at all. If this story moved you, even a little, don't let it end here. Hit the like button, not for the algorithm, but as a quiet nod to everyone who's ever been told they're too slow, too late, or not built for the race. Subscribe, because this channel is for thinkers, for builders, for people who understand that real success isn't always loud or fast, but it's always earned. And before you go, drop a comment. Are you running at the world's pace or at your own? Because the truth is, most people quit because they're trying to move like cheetahs in a race meant for tortoises. Stay patient, stay deliberate. I'll see you in the next story.